This is 24/7 World Radio.
Hello, Brother Eric John Phelps, back with the broadcast here with our most beloved and erudite, heavy, serious researcher, Brother George Widger. Brother George, welcome to the broadcast again.
Okay, I'll cop to one of those. Researcher, okay. Heavy, that's debatable. Erudite, okay, that's also debatable. Good morning, brother.
Good morning, brother.
I know we go to observe the Mary Mass of Mary, but as I mentioned on the radio, that today is Boxing Day in the UK and other Commonwealth countries like Canada. That's where you go back to the store and return the items that you don't want. For some reason, it never really caught on here in the States.
What did you say, Boxing Day?
Correct.
Boxing Day, never heard of it, but thank you.
Really? Oh, okay. So,
See how erudite you are, George? Came up with something I never heard of. Of course, I'm sure there's a lot of those things, but that was your first lead off this morning, so I'm writing it down.
Oh, okay. So my scripture, and it has nothing to do with pugilist, so it has to do with returning items. Okay, so my scripture verse is Romans 1, verse 1. Romans 1, verse 1. Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated unto the gospel of God. I'll skip down to verse 7 because that's actually the key verse. To all, excuse me, to all that be in Rome, beloved of God, called to be saints, grace to you and peace unto God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, so I didn't want to expound in those verses per se. I just wanted to make a couple of observations. First, according to the Catholic Church, Simon Peter was the first pope. They said that Jesus created that office in the year 33 AD, almost 2,000 years ago. Well, if that were the case, one, why was Paul writing this letter to the Romans? Two, why didn't Paul address Simon Peter? Don't you think that would have been a bit of a, not only an oversight, but a slight?
I would think. Mm-hmm. Of course, you know, brother, that the tomb of Peter was discovered in 1953 by some Franciscans in Jerusalem. That is a fact. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so anyhow, now we know that Paul wrote roughly half the New Testament, and yes, Simon Peter did write a few letters in the New Testament. However, Paul did the bulk of the writing in the New Testament.
That's right, 14 epistles. Peter wrote 2. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now, granted, Simon Peter was important, but you notice that roughly through the middle of the book of Acts of the Apostle, yes, there's a heavy focus on Peter, but then Paul dominates the narrative for the remainder of the book.
Mm-hmm. Amen. And he's the one that turns to the Gentiles, where the reoffer of the Davidic kingdom ceases in Acts chapter 28. And now he goes to the Gentiles, and a couple years later, Jerusalem is destroyed.
Okay. So that was my scripture verse for the day. Okay. A couple of things I'd like to cover. Since this is probably going to be the last time I stream with you this year in 2022, I just wanted to empty out my folder, so to speak, if I could, because I've had some things in there for a while and some things that are current. This week, Anthony Stephen Fauci, the U.S. director of the Infectious Disease Department, or whatever, which is part of the National Institutes of Health, actually retires after 54 years for working with the NIH, National Institutes of Health, and 38 years of being the director of the Infectious Disease Department. Now,
so we can create all kinds of pathogens to infect these heretics and liberals. Go ahead.
Basically. Now, as I said, Fauci is retiring this week, and on Saturday, Christmas Eve, December the 24th, he turned 82 years old. Now, I know we've discussed him several times over the last, almost 3 years. And just as a reminder, he went to Regis High School in Manhattan, New York. He's run by the Society of Jesus, aka the Jesuit. So he was there for 4 years. Then he'll later go on and get his undergrad degree from Holy Cross in Massachusetts. So he received.
And what's that?
Also Jesuit.
Thank you.
So I remember seeing him in an interview, in an interview a couple years ago, talking about his experience at Regis High School. And he said it took him an hour and a half by train to get there. So that meant he had a 3-hour commute each day.
Most loyal, I would say, for which
Correct.
they greatly rewarded him.
Yes. So he said, now he said the fathers at Regis said, look, Tony, if you do well here, we can guarantee you success in your any future endeavors. So he is almost immediately on a medical track.
That's right. They run the empire. The Jesuits run the Pope's Holy Roman 14th Amendment, socialist, communist, cartel, capitalist, corporate American empire. And they place the graduates of their colleges wherever they deem them best to be. And that's what they did with Fauci.
Okay, so now something I mentioned before, his wife, Christine Grady, she has even more Jesuit education. She got her undergrad degree from Georgetown and her PhD, and she got her master's degree from Boston College. So she has 12, 13 years of post-secondary school education. So between them, they have roughly 20 years of Jesuit education.
And by the way, for the listeners, if you've never been to Boston College, you need to go there sometime and look at the magnitude of that campus. It's huge. And this reflects their financial wealth and their political power. Go ahead.
Okay, and now if I can just mention at least one thing of a local nature, as after New Year's next week, Sonoma County gets a new district attorney. Her name is Carla Rodriguez. She's been with the DA's office for 25 years, and she was just elected, I guess, a few months ago. They had a special election this summer. Anyhow, I've mentioned her before, but just as a quick reminder, she got her undergrad degree from St. Mary's College in La Moraga, California, which is Catholic. She went on to get her law degree from the University of San Francisco.
What's that?
Which is Jesuit. Now,
it's like good old Nancy Pelosi.
Okay, so Rodriguez replaces Jill Ravitch, who's been the district attorney for the county since 2010. She also got her law degree from the University of San Francisco. Now, between 1994 and 2000, Michael Mullins.
Now, let's go back a little. What's the importance of the district attorney, George? Please tell us that. Why that office is so important.
Well, he, or she in this case, determines what cases are prosecuted and not prosecuted.
That's right. They decide who they're going to bring to trial. And so they can decide they're not going to bring such and such to trial, even though they've broken the law, because they have that power.
Mm-hmm. Now, if I just go back a ways, so I've talked about the current DA and the DA-to-be, who's going to be here less than a week, or in a week or so. But then Michael Mullins was the district attorney for Sonoma County from 1994 to 2010. Now, his background, as far as I can tell, in terms of education, is secular. However, after he left the DA's office, he became the chief legal counsel for Catholic Charities of Northern California, and he currently holds that position.
Mm-hmm.
Now
he's a chief legal counsel for Catholic Charities. So now we'll have more Jesuit power through the lawyers. Because remember, 1 out of 10 lawyers in this country is Jesuit trained.
Okay, so this is like a Russian bundling doll. Now, as I said, Mullins was the DA from 94 to 2010. From 1974 to 1994, Gene Tunney Jr. was the district attorney of Sonoma County. He's a son of Gene Tunney Sr., who was a boxer and an actor of sorts. Now, Gene Tunney Jr. got his law degree from University of San Francisco, And as I said, he was the DA from 1974 to 1994. Prior to Tunney, John Hawks was the district attorney of Sonoma County from 1972 to 74. Now, he ostensibly was Protestant. He was a member of a local a local Bible church, Santa Rosa Bible Church. However, this is something that was mentioned in his obituary, that he was also a member of Lodge 57, Scottish Rite.
Right, and I would also mention to say that this particular Bible church that he went to was not reading from the Bible. They were reading from anything other than the Bible, which is the AB 1611. So that's the connection with Masonry and all these new Bibles. So he's a brother Freemason. He's an apostate church, apostate Bible, not promoting the Reformation. So great.
So that means that the Vatican, for at least half a century, since 1972, has controlled the district attorney's office in Sonoma County, California. Now, people might be a bit perturbed. Why do I mention such minutia? Who cares about who runs the DA's office in a backwater county? Well, I guess it matters to Rome. Now, as I said, this
every office matters to Rome because it's death by 1,000 cuts. We have one here, we have one here, and have one here. Now, pretty soon we have all power, and there's no one that can oppose us. So they just get in a little at a time. Death to free government by 1,000 cuts. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, in the previous hour, you made reference to the actor and comedian Dick Gregory,
Yep.
Who actually attended, was it Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, where he was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, which is a Black Freemasonic fraternity.
Mm-hmm. It's just another Black Freemason, another step and fetch it for the Pope of Rome to agitate here the blacks against the whites for all this black crime to drive the whites into the new right. And that's the purpose of Dick Gregory. Never once did he ever say anything about the papacy's involvement in the civil rights movement. Never once. As a negative thing, pardon me.
Well, of course, now speaking of Alpha Phi Alpha, the senator-elect of Georgia is a fellow by the name of Raphael Warnock, who's a Black man who currently was pastoring Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia.
And pastoring the socialist, communist, hatefully racist Ebenezer Baptist Church that worked in conjunction with the CIA, with the FBI in the bombing of those 4 little black girls in that particular church in Birmingham.
Are you talking about 16th Avenue Baptist Church? It was in 1963. I don't recall the date.
That's right. All working in conjunction with Ebenezer, all of them, because it's all Black Masonic.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of Warnock, he got his undergrad degree from Morehouse College. Surprise, surprise, which is where
Morehouse College. I met a Black man from Morehouse College once on an airplane flight. Mm-hmm. His name was Elmo. Never forget it. Well-spoken, handsome young man, but absolutely a socialist. Morehouse College, and also run by Black and mulatto Freemasons. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Well, okay, so a little bit more about Warnock. He was born in 1969, I believe July the 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, is his birthday. So he's 53 years old. So in 2013, Warnock received the Archbishop John Donahue Prize from Catholic Charities of Georgia. Donahue had been the Black Archbishop of Atlanta, Georgia. In 2010, Warnock actually hosted then Catholic Bishop Wilson Gregory, now Archbishop Wilson Cardinal Gregory, on an anti-death penalty conference at his church.
An anti-what conference?
Death penalty conference.
Death loyalty, is that what you said?
Death penalty.
Yeah, anti-death penalty, of course. Papacy is always anti-death penalty when it comes to destroying a white Protestant nation, but all for it when it comes to running a Roman Catholic tyranny or the Inquisition.
Also, and for good measure, and to round out, so Warnock back in 1995, he was a 25, 26 years old. He actually hosted Fidel Castro at Ebenezer Baptist Church.
Good old Fidel Castro, trained by Jesuits for 7 years in Cuba.
Yes, and I have it from
and put in power by the CIA. Go ahead.
Okay, so why? Okay, so Castro was a communist and atheist. He was trained by the Jesuits. He went to 3 different Catholic institutions. But why would this purportedly Baptist church allow somebody to come and speak there?
Yeah, why would they do that, George? Or are you asking me?
Well,
I think that's a good question for you. I mean, I'm sure you do well with it. Why would they do that?
Well, because the Baptist church, even though it's not a Baptist church, they're kindred Freemasons.
Yes, the Black Baptists in the South are for the most part Freemasons, Prince Hall Rite. And they're working with the other Masonic lodges, Scottish Rite and others, carrying out the purposes of the Jesuit papacy.
Okay, and if I could just throw something out there. As you know, we just ended the Christmas season in America and the rest of the world. And of course, you hear these Christmas songs like Jingle Bell and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, as secular songs, as well as so-called religious songs like Silent Night, which is Catholic, and all that sort of stuff. But one of the novelty songs they'll play is, besides Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, was Christmas Bells Playing, which is the follow-up hit to was it the Royal Guardsmen of the Buckingham Palace. The original hit was The Bloody Red Baron of Germany.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you
10, 20, 30, 60 more. Yeah, okay, I remember that.
Okay, so I was vaguely familiar with the character of the Bloody Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen. Mm-hmm. And he sort of gets a bad rap, somewhat unfairly, in that you might get the impression that he was a monster who just went around murdering other pilots. And yes, he did have 80 kills, but his kill count actually could have been considerably higher because he was an old Prussian nobleman.
Sure. Yeah, and he was a Prussian Lutheran.
Well, yes, and of course they had a policy. Now the German Air Force, it wasn't called the Luftwaffe at the time, had a policy is that you didn't shoot down disabled planes. If the opposing plane, the British or French or whomever, did not pose a threat to you, you didn't shoot him down. It was just like.
Well, that's a nice moral Protestant rule. It's not a Catholic rule. Go ahead.
Okay, so he was like.
Remember, for the listener, World War I was about destroying the Second Protestant Reich. That's what the Jesuits were doing.
And there's all sorts of debate. As he was shot down in April of 1918, so near the end of it was like April the 21st. And so there's debate as to who actually shot him down. Was it an Australian anti-aircraft battery, or was it a Canadian pilot? But you see, thing is, something people don't realize, and I didn't realize this, but it was a win-win situation for the Vatican. Yes, the Red Baron, Richthofen, did shoot down 80 planes, and there were fair fights as far as I can tell. But he was killing, for the most part, British
Protestants. Yes. Yes.
And he
the Protestants to kill one another. Mm-hmm.
So you have and of course he was either shot down by the Protestant Australians or the Protestant Canadians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was a win-win situation.
Yep. White Protestants on both sides killing each other. What a delight for the Jesuit order.
And of course, you have liberal Catholics, sprinkled in.
Right, sure. But liberal Catholics that enjoy gun ownership and enjoy freedom of speech, yeah, they got to go too. Because the Jesuits are against all heretics and liberals, and the liberals are Roman Catholics that aspire to certain Protestant doctrines.
And of course, you could say, it's easy to divorce ourselves emotionally from the initial stage of the Second 30 Years of War, aka World War I. But it was a complete bloodbath. And I know we've talked about this before, but it wasn't just the mass murder with the machine guns and the mustard gas and all that sort of stuff, but it was the psychological warfare, the shell shock, which is what they call that, we call it post-traumatic stress disorder today. It was the living in horrible conditions, living in rat-infested trenches and things like that.
Yep.
And I wasn't going to bring this up, but have you ever seen the movie, was it Joel Noe?
I don't think so.
Okay, came out in 2005. Now, it's about Christmas, and so I'm not going to address that. But it's actually about the Christmas truce of 1914 between the French, the Germans, and the British. It was actually a Scottish regiment. And they basically got together and said, hey, the weather's lousy. Let's just declare a ceasefire. And it wasn't the generals or field marshals. It was the soldiers on the battlefront. And they said, sure, okay. Well, we'll take off Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And one of the Scottish soldiers said, hey, you know what? In Britain, we take off the day after Christmas for Boxing Day. Oh, okay. And you know what? Let's just take the rest of the year off. Okay. So they got together and, they started exchanging pictures. Oh, this is my wife. And they started talking to each other. Oh, what'd you do before the war? Oh, I was a teacher. Or, oh, really? I was a watchmaker. And they said, do you know what this war is about? No, not really. And so after New Year's of 1915, they had to say, okay, well, the truce is over. It's been like a week or so. And they couldn't fire on each other.
Yeah, it's terrible. Just terrible. Protestant Germans and Protestant English, and Protestant Americans, Baptists killing each other in a war overseen by traitorous leaders, subject to the papacy, just like today. That's Russia, Ukraine. Treasure leaders on both sides for the destruction of the Orthodox Ukrainian people and many Orthodox Russians. That's why they're drawing it out, destroying these targeted populations.
Well, funny you should mention that, brother, because I was going to, I have it here in my notes. Zelensky was actually in Washington, D.C. last week on December 21st. So he had his hat out and said, please give me some more money. And I guess last week, Congress passed a $1.7 trillion budget.
Yeah.
And the bill was hundreds of pages long, which would be almost impossible to read.
Yeah, it was thousands. It was 1,000. I think it was 2,000 to 3,000 pages, something like that. Of course, in our new country, George, if you want to be a part of it, in our particular congressional bills that are passed, they're no longer than 10 pages. So everybody can read them and everybody can decide. None of this 250, 200,000, whatever. That's illegal. But go ahead.
Okay, well, anyhow, so Ukraine got something like another $45 billion this year. On top of the 80+ billion they received. So that's over $100 billion to the Ukraine.
While we have all these Americans under the bridges in these tent cities dying, and they're going to give billions to some foreign country that has no meaning for us. See, this is why all the leftist, socialist, communist Democrats need to get out of that party, because this government's financing their destruction and their people's destruction.
So, and I was just thinking, so he was just trying to, I guess whoever wrote Zelensky's speech was fairly knowledgeable of our history. And he said, now we're engaging a war for our survival through the winter of 2022, 2023. So this is our Bastogne and this is our Valley Forge.
Oh, great. Not hardly.
Well, why do you beg to differ with Mr. Zelensky?
Well, Mr. Zelensky is a servant of the papacy. George Washington was not a servant of the papacy. Remember, there was a Conway conspiracy that they tried to get him removed, and the Lord intervened and prevented that from happening, led by an Irish Catholic. So no, George Washington was a man of God, raised up by God to give us political liberty. But Zelensky is no man of God. He's a Jew-serving pope. He's a pope-serving Jew. I'm sure a Freemason also, and is for the annihilation of targeted populations in Ukraine. So he ought to be tried for treason and executed. You might as well try Putin for treason and execute him while you're at it. I got this. Go ahead, excuse me.
So yeah, Zelensky is Jewish. Yes, he is a Freemason. Now, however, his wife is Ukrainian Orthodox, so he had their children baptized Ukrainian Orthodox.
Mhm.
But that's essentially, for all intents and purposes, his wife is a Catholic.
Of course. Sure.
Okay, so as I said, Zelensky has had at least one papal audience, and Putin has had at least half a dozen. Putin is also a known Freemason. They're also both members of the World Economic Forum, which is a front for the Vatican.
Yep.
Now, as I said, earlier this year, in one of Zelensky's videos, he's wearing a green T-shirt, but appears to have a Maltese cross on it. Now, granted, it could have been his laundry day, and he just didn't have anything else available.
I doubt it, George.
Okay, I'm not saying he's a Knight of Malta, but who knows?
Kissinger is. The Jew Kissinger is an Knight of Malta. So is Bloomberg. So, these Jews are busy sucking up to the Pope and do anything that he wants them to do because the Jews know, these evil Jews know the Pope has all the money. And they worship Mammon, as Christ warned against. So, yeah. The same old story. Same system, same devil, just different actors.
So his speech was fairly successful. Now, but something I just wonder, how is it that Volodymyr Zelensky was able to fly over the United States? Because was he concerned about being shot down by Vladimir Putin?
Oh, probably not, because he was leaving on the western side of Ukraine, which Kiev's in the western side. So he probably had a nice flight. But then again, Putin would make sure he had a nice flight. We're not going to shoot him down. He's key in our annihilation process here. So,
and something I've mentioned before, how is it over the last year that Zelensky is able to receive all these foreign dignitaries, Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, Justin Trudeau, Boris Johnson? He's had more visitors than an amusement park.
That's right. And you know where that, George? When you see all these Americans going over there, of course they're traitors, but it's inciting the Russian people to war against America because their oppressors are these papal Roman Catholics siding with Zelensky and others. Back in a moment, 24/7 World Radio, Brother Eric John Phelps.
This is 24/7 World Radio, and you're listening to The Eric John Phelps Show.
This is Brother Nicholas. Join me every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the German Bible Truth Hour and at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Dutch Bible Truth Hour on 24/7 World Radio. This is Bruder Nicholas. Ich lade euch herzlich ein, mich anzuhören jeder Dienstag um 2 Uhr nachmittags, amerikanische Zeit, für die deutsche Bibelwahrheitsstunde und 3 Uhr amerikanische Standardzeit für die niederländische Bibelwahrheitsstunde am World Radio 24/7. Dit is broeder Nico. U bent hartelijk uitgenodigd om elke dinsdag om 2 uur Amerikaanse standaardtijd het Duitse Bijbelwaarheidsuur te volgen en 3 uur Amerikaanse standaardtijd het Nederlandse Bijbelwaarheidsuur te volgen op 24/7 World Radio.
This is The Eric John Phelps Show on 24/7 World Radio.
Today with Brother George Widger in the second hour. So, Brother George, let's continue on where we left off.
Okay, by the way, if you've not seen the movie, was it Noel Joey, Merry Christmas? I would recommend it. Yes, I know we've talked about Christmas, but
How do you spell it?
I believe JOYEUXNOLEL. I believe I can check the spelling for you on that.
Well, movie. Okay, I'll try to find it.
Okay, it came out in 2005. and it's based on a true story. Well, there's a scene in the movie where one of the German junior officer, lieutenant, as we say in America, lieutenant everywhere else, he's berating one of his soldiers. And he said, Schmidt, or whatever his name, what did you do before the war? And he said, I was an opera singer, sir. Oh, well, I hope you were a better singer than you are a soldier, or something along those lines. And anyhow, so in the scene, where they're having their truce, they decided to, they're singing Silent Night or Stille Nacht in German. And they're having like a mass, and they invite the German lieutenant to participate. And said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I had to decline. I'm Jewish," and which is when I saw that, that struck me as,
which is creating anti-Jewish fury. Remember, everything in Hollywood is a play. They say, "Oh, it's based on a true story," but it's not the true story that really happened. Who knows? There were probably some Jews that sang the song, but oh no, we're going to create more anti-Jewish fury here.
Well, actually, the lieutenant was an empathetic character. He was a competent soldier. He seemed to care about his men.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't say it was meant to create. Okay, well, perhaps I was mistaken.
Very subtly, George. Remember, they all have that undercurrent of their design.
Mm-hmm. Well, something we've discussed before, in World War I, aka the initial stage of the Second 30 Years' War, there was something like over 100,000 German Jews who fought for Germany.
Yes.
Okay, so that was very realistic.
They were nationalists. They loved their country. They were German Jews. And why not? Because, they'd been enfranchised by the Protestants, by the Lutherans in 1873 or thereabouts. So they were prospering. They were doing well in Germany. They were contributing to all the arts and sciences. So they were fighting for the Protestant Second Reich that was not anti-Jew. Mm-hmm.
And of course, so it was mutually beneficial.
Sure, of course.
And of course, when you have, so the late 19th century, early 20th century, just before World War I, was probably the pinnacle of German culture.
Sure was. They were leading the world in inventions. I think they were behind us, but they were the greatest inventors on the continent. They came out with all these new sciences. It was a great culture. So the Jesuits had to destroy it. And remember, the Jesuits were expelled from Germany from 1872 to 1917 when Wilhelm II readmitted them. So the Jesuits had to have payback for their expulsion, and so that was World War I.
Okay, so there's at least one other thing I would like to mention is last week I was reading something online about the need to clamp down on medical disinformation and misinformation, especially when it comes to whether the treatments are valid and anything they want to. There's a need to clamp down on anything that facilitates.
Including the truth, including certain scientific papers that are absolutely truthful. We're not going to allow those to circulate. And God forbid that we should listen to John Rappaport, which is probably one of the foremost authorities on the subject. So what that means is we're going to lose freedom of speech. That's what they really want, because the Jesuits hate freedom of speech.
Well, amen. And so anyhow, I read this article. Don't have it in front of me, but the source of it is Physicians for Human Rights. Now, based on that name, that sounds like a good thing because, hey, doctors should be for people being treated decently. Now, this organization was founded in 1986. Now, I'm just going to give you
by the way, it should be, the human rights bit is just another communist shibboleth. It should be called Organization for Fundamental Rights.
Amen.
So they're not given by man. Yeah.
Okay. So who founded Physicians for Human Rights? Well, one of the leading architects was Jonathan Fine, who lived from 1931 to 2018. Another co-founder was Jack Geiger and Carolina Eisenberg.
So we have 3 Jews, right?
Now, a little bit more on Jack Geiger. Now, his dates were the 11th of November, 1925, December 28th, 2020. He was friends and actually marched with A. Philip Randolph in 1942.
See what I said in my first hour? All these Jews facilitating the black communist civil rights movement to aid them in their dominance over us white people. This is another example of that. A. Philip Randolph was a high-level black Freemason, led the sleeping car porters, and he was really over Martin Luther King.
Well, okay, he also worked with Bayard Rustin.
Yeah, that homosexual. Mm-hmm.
Yes, whose boyfriend was a Catholic. And there was Rustin, who wrote the famous "I Have a Dream" speech in 1963.
Oh, he wrote that?
Correct.
I mocked that. I have a dream. Oh, that every black man can have a white woman. Oh, I have a dream. That's one thing they didn't add, but that's exactly what they meant. Go ahead.
Okay, so now I talked about the history, the founding of Physicians for Human Rights, but who runs it today? Well, you probably don't have to guess too hard. The CFO is Vincent Agapino, who got his PhD and MD from Georgetown University.
Sounds like an Italian Catholic.
How'd you know? Okay, so these are some of the other leaders. So these are the people who are on the board of directors for the Physicians for Human Rights. You have Juan Mendez, who taught at Georgetown Law and Notre Dame Law.
Oh, goody. He's another Hispanic, probably secret society member, serving the Jesuits there.
Okay.
In their most beloved field of law, which hates the common law and loves Roman civil law. Go ahead.
Okay, another member is Casey Grittner, who prior to joining the Physicians for Human Rights, she was on the board of directors for Catholic Medical Mission Boards, and she got her undergrad degree from Fordham. She later got a master's degree from the London School of Economics.
So that's Jesuit Fordham University and the Jesuit-controlled London School of Economics, which is socialist to the core. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So some other members are Susan Kadenda. She got her master's degree from Eastern Catholic University in Nairobi, Kenya. Then, you also have a fellow who's of a black Congolese, who is Joel Muskokuru. Okay, don't ask me how. He got his undergrad degree from Catholic University of Bukavu University in Congo. You have Caitlin Wilson, who got
this was once the Belgian Congo?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Run by King Leopold II?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Who used to cut off the limbs of the blacks there if they weren't producing enough rubber when they were dealing with the rubber trees. Yeah. The Belgian Roman Catholics have a tremendous history of persecution of the blacks in the Congo. But go ahead.
Yes. Another member, there are two more. I just want to mention two other names. Caitlin Wilson, who got her undergrad degree from Boston College. You also have Tom Schleichel, who got his undergrad degree from Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
There's another Jew getting educated by the Jesuits there, Jesuit Marquette, just like that mulatto Robinson of Who We Are. He's trained by Jesuits at Marquette. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have at least 7 people who are on the board of directors who have Catholic/Jesuit educations. So you have to wonder who runs Physicians for Human Rights.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, George, maybe they just got their degrees from the Jesuits and said, we're not serving the Jesuits anymore and we're going to go ahead and do the right thing. Maybe that's what they decided. Huh?
Well, yeah, that's probably,
yeah, sure.
Well, speaking of Marquette, I sent you this video of the weekend from 1988, March the 3rd. You had a couple of poets who were popular, I guess, in the 1950s, William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg. Yeah. So something I was just wondering. Allen Ginsberg was, grew up nominally Jewish. He said I was only nominally Jewish. I wasn't. I didn't have a bar mitzvah or anything like that. But he was a devout atheist. So I just wondering, why would a school, Marquette, which is Jesuit, Catholic, why would they invite somebody like Allen Ginsberg to come and speak there?
Because the Jesuits are generally atheists at the top. They're Satanists, but they love to facilitate the religion of atheism.
Mm-hmm.
And that emboldens men in their sin because there's no God to answer to.
Okay, so this, as I said, this is 1988, so 34, almost 35 years ago. And this is, the pre-internet era. So I was just thinking, maybe if you're a student at Marquette, you went there because, hey, I heard it's a good school, it can help my career, which is oftentimes why people will go to a place like Marquette or Georgetown. It has nothing to do with religion. It's just like, hey, it's a good way to make contacts and things like that. And you're an 18, 19-year-old student in 1988, and you're in Marquette, and you hear that Allen Ginsberg is coming there to speak. Now, as I said, this is the pre-internet era, so you really didn't have the option of pulling out your phone and go looking up his bio. Now, granted, it's possible that you could have gone to your library and looked up his information in your encyclopedia, but how many people were going to do that back then?
Yeah, nobody.
Okay, well, perhaps some people. And so he was like, as I said, this is the late 1980s, like he'd not been significant in 30 years. But so I watched his video, and Burroughs was actually worse than Ginsberg. So wait a second, why are they teaching this sort of stuff in my school? Or why are they allowing these people to speak at my school? I thought this was supposed to be a Catholic institution.
It is. Just remember the logical conclusion of Romanism is atheism. And that's why France today, which was once a very important Catholic country, is for the most part atheist. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just like Ireland is, this is like, this is something I believe your colleague Sean Hanlon mentioned, is the two fastest religious movements in Europe in general and Ireland in particular are atheism and Islam.
Well, Islam, because they're bringing all those savages in from the Middle East, that's why it's the fastest growing religion. But atheism is unique to the whites, unique to the white infidels. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And well, so you had this organization, as I said, Physicians for Human Rights, who are putting out this stuff saying we need to clamp down on misinformation. Well, first, who decides what is disinformation or misinformation?
Yeah, who decides that?
I mean, you could say a dissenting view or purported misinformation or disinformation. But just to say flat out, no, that's just wrong. That goes against the whole Western ethos of freedom of speech and freedom of conscience.
That's right. That's right. Sure, it does, George. It goes against the First Amendment. It goes against what we championed in the Reformation: freedom of speech, press, and conscience.
Well, okay, I've heard people make a counter argument. If you're talking about certain platforms like YouTube or Facebook, well, those are private companies. They can do whatever they want.
That's true, they can. That's why I was kicked out of a library here in Lancaster. I was kicked out of a theological library of their school there across the street from the F&M College. And I was kicked out because they said this is a private university and we can forbid you from using our library, which you're using it for purposes of hatred and division and blah, blah, blah. Well, I just asked the librarian there if I could have the copy of the Black Pope so I could make copies of it. And he didn't like that, so he kicked me out of the library. They could do it because it was private.
Okay, how are the
It's Lancaster Theological Seminary. That's what it was. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Okay, so the problem with a site like YouTube or Facebook or whatever, Twitter, is those aren't really private platforms. It was the NSA that created those. It was the U.S. government that was responsible for their genesis.
Oh, well, then they're not private. And so that needs to be asserted. Mm-hmm.
So people could, I don't know how many people I know who've had their platforms taken, the videos taken down, kicked off their sites and so forth because they're spreading allegedly hate speech or
I'm one of them. I'm one of them, dear brother. So
okay, and I
kicked me off 8 times, I think.
Okay. So, and I've known of actual medical doctors who've actually been kicked off of mainstream medical doctors who've been kicked off of these sites for allegedly spreading medical misinformation. And what they've been doing is saying, no, we're just simply reading from the CDC or the FDA. Well, we're quoting their own statistics. Well, that might create something like hesitancy. Which reminds me, I had this from several sources. There has never been a study on any, they're talking polio, measles, mumps, rubella, whatever, on the carcinogenity, mutagenity, or fertility. Carcinogenity, however you say it, has to do with the likelihood of developing cancer. Mutagenity has to do with the effect on your DNA, and fertility has to do with obviously giving birth. There has never been a study anywhere. So we've been told for decades, always safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. And by the way, that I mentioned, they're safe and effective.
And one more thing. Just remember, when you read the protocols of the learned elders of Zion that the Jesuits wrote and blamed on the Jews, it says right in there in protocol number 19, we will goyim with the diseases. And that's what it says, right in the protocols, written in 1890s.
Okay, and people will say, like, hey, we're different. I got the polio back in the 1950s or 1960s, and I'm fine. Or when you're in the service, you have to get a zillion. Well, we survived. Well, how would you respond to claims like that?
It's long term. The Jesuits have mastered this, so it's a long term effect. I was a victim of polio because I had earaches every 2 weeks. I thought I was going to die. People just felt like someone was jamming a knife in my ear, in my brain. And then, of course, you have stunted growth. You don't develop physically like my father did. I'm not what my father was. And so you're stunted growth, you're stunted intellect, you're stunted sexually, you're stunted in your development, you're stunted in all these things that they stunted for the purpose of destroying Western civilization. And they've mastered this for probably the first 50 years before they did it. And they experimented on cats and dogs and other animals, and then they used it on us. But because we don't have a press here that's truly free, and men that are serious about resisting the designs of the Jesuits, they get away with it.
Mm-hmm. And of course, how much money do corporations like Pfizer spend on advertising? I don't know, but it's probably billions of dollars. And I've seen videos like saying, welcome to the news this evening. CNN is brought to you by Pfizer. Mm-hmm. And they probably spend billions of dollars just on ads, radio and television, saying that these products are safe and effective. And yes, there have been a few people here and there who've had problems, but these conditions are so rare they're practically non-existent statistically.
And I have a video from the head of, I think it was Pfizer, one of those chemical drug companies, that said, we are busy. We seek to reduce half the world's population. He was saying it, and he was speaking to a group of people, talking to Klaus Schwab, and they all clapped. I got a video on that. Anybody wants it? I'll send it to you.
Okay, well, yes, because you please send it to me. I may have seen it before, but I wouldn't mind looking at it again. And so, as I said, there've never been any sort of safety studies on your likelihood of developing cancer from any of having problems with pregnancy. And this is something people don't talk about. Also, something I mentioned before, in 1986, the United States passed something called the Childhood Protection Act, which basically indemnified chemical companies from injuries.
Utter disgrace. Yeah.
So the adult version of that was called the PrEP in 2005, called the Public Readiness Emergency Act, or something
deceptive. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so
some lawyer double talk. Go ahead. Okay,
so with these two laws, they essentially indemnified the pharmaceutical companies. But back in the 1980s, the people were suing the bejesus, they were suing the daylights out of the pharmaceutical company. They were practically insolvent. So they went to Congress and said, hey, you need to do something. So that was the whole rationale behind the Childhood Injury Protection Act. So, but but they said these products are safe and effective. If they're safe and effective, why do they need this protection?
Yeah. See, the ones that are supposed to protect us from this kind of thing are the congressmen. And if we had truly patriotic, nationalistic, honest congressmen that hopefully would believe the Bible and believe on Christ, they would say, we're never going to do that. We're never passing any such act. We're here for the protection of the people who sent us here. Yeah. That's why the vast majority of them are traitors.
Oh, yes. And of course, you have a few who are like controlled opposition, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Oh, okay, I'm not going to talk about the fact she's a woman, but she's said a number of things that are correct over the last few years. However, she blames the wrong thing when she's talking about these wildfires in the West. She talks about Jewish ray guns.
About what?
Jewish ray guns.
Jewish ray guns? Ray guns?
Ray guns that are causing the fires out in places like California.
So she's blaming the Jews for it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, blame the Jews for what the Jesuits do. That's their old adage. Mm-hmm.
And so okay. So, however, but as I said, she's put there for a purpose. She's like, they say, she's a
she's creating anti-Jewish fury. That's her purpose. Gonna beat that drum.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just like Nick Fuentes.
Yes. Oh yeah, that Roman Catholic savage, but wants to bring the Inquisition back and. Yeah, quite the guy, and it's amazing that he has this very nice website and wonderful presentation. I wonder what big money's behind him. It'd be interesting to find out. But yeah, got Fuentes. You're gonna get more and more coming too.
And
blame the Jews.
And of course, he was in D.C. on January 6, 2021, and there's video of him along with others like Ray Epps egging people on.
Mm-hmm. Does anything happen to those guys? Are they prosecuted? Are they arrested?
Well, it seems highly unlikely since Epps is at minimum on the FBI payroll.
Absolutely. I think he's CIA. Mm-hmm. That white devil. Mm-hmm.
So the whole purpose of January 6th, well, there were several purposes. It's basically our business plot, and I don't have time to go into that. But basically, you had millions of Americans who were angry about the direction of the country, and they said, we know
millions of white conservative people that work hard every day that don't want to be destroyed anymore, and they thought Trump was their hero and one that would save them. They went there in a peaceful meeting on January 6th, and Trump was facilitating with Biden to make sure we're going to turn it into some kind of a raid on the Capitol building, facilitated by the Capitol Police, of course. Yeah, it was a great black op, and because the white people in this country refused to learn their history, and had been so dumbed down, they were suckers. And I told my listeners, I said, don't you dare go to that January 6th thing. It's all a setup. You're gonna regret it. I don't know if they listened or not, but go ahead.
Well, and of course, you have the FBI are actually going after people now. There are people who have been arrested across the country who are just simply there on January 6th, not who you wanted in the Capitol building. So, so it's now the First Amendment. If you exercise your First Amendment right, you're now a criminal.
Yeah, well, the ones that raided and went into the Capitol building, they committed a crime, and they all ought to be prosecuted for that. But those who did not go into the Capitol building, that were just simply there at the rally, they didn't commit any crimes. So.
And the only crime they committed was trespassing, which is an infraction.
Well, there was trespassing, there was breaking property, and who else but the Jesuit Coadjutors knew what they did there. So it was a criminal activity of going up into the Capitol. That was wrong. It was against the law. They should have never done that, but they're being waved up there by all these CIA ops and the Capitol Police. Yeah, we'll open the door for you. Shut up.
Okay, so I guess we'll have to pick this up in the new year.
Oh, are we getting close? Yeah, I guess we are, George. Okay, well, let's go ahead and give us contact information, George, and I guess we'll be on our way.
Okay, if people have any questions, comments, concerns, critiques, if they want to send me a video or article, please send me a line at georgewidger1969@gmail.com, WIDGER 1969. They get it from you if they didn't get my email.
Okay. All right, George. Hey, well, thanks so much for being with us. Lord bless, and hopefully we'll see you next Monday.
Okay.
In the new year. Lord bless. Bye-bye. Eric John Phelps, thank you for tuning in today. Book Vatican Assassins, Win the House of My Friends. Go to my website, VaticanAssassins.org. Pick up a copy of the ebook. Join Wellevate on 24/7 World Radio. Purchase my broadcast. Lord willing, I'll be with you on Wednesday. Till then, Maranatha.